Everyone's done it.
Okay, so good afternoon to everyone.
Good afternoon.
I'll just note that all of the board members are here, so instead of calling a vote. Okay, and then the second item is the approval of the minutes for the May 17th, 2024 meeting. And they should be in the packet that was provided by Krista earlier.
Just the one page.
It's just the one page.
I printed the agenda out, but I was so I forgot it in the printer. Sorry about that. I got no,
You don't have the packet, here's an extra packet.
no, I have the packet,
Doesn't have an agenda.
yeah, that's okay, it's got the minutes, though.
Yes,
Yeah.
I move adoption of the draft minutes as presented.
Okay,
Support.
okay, it's been moved and supported to approve the draft minutes for the May 17th meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no, and the motion carries. Okay, item 3 is a discussion and consideration of one-time capital projects. At our last meeting, we had a discussion regarding one-time capital projects that could be included as part of a capital improvement plan for transit. And I know that Ken Anderson provided us additional information that might help us kind of decide what type of projects we would like to recommend to the Board of Trustees. And so we can maybe start there with our discussion based on the information that we received.
Ken's information on shelters and stuff.
Yeah, he sent some different, I think, a couple of options related to shelters, and then he provided cost projections for a shelter. I think there's 2 different types. So he provided us information regarding the costs associated with each one. Let's see here.
Yeah.
So one is 12,000 and the other is
10,000.
10,500. Wow, it seems like you get a lot more bus shelter for the slightly higher cost.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Although I suppose if you're buying multiple shelters, you could stretch your dollars farther with, you know.
Yeah, if you-
But
yeah.
which says it's the labor as a, yeah,
It's the
The
main
labor
cost, the
is
main
the-
cost is the labor, not the material. Gotcha.
it's a slightly, yeah, something, a slight increase for a larger shelter. Labor is about the same.
Oh, and then one picture even has the bicycle racks shown.
Yeah, and we had talked about bicycle racks as something that we wanted to recommend. I don't know if we need to get into any quantity, but again, maybe it's a matter of just identifying the cost and maybe include them where they're necessary.
Do we have costs in the proposal?
There, we have, the ESTF put together some just basic costs.
Oh, here it is.
Yeah,
A
that,
pad with.
yeah, those were like, they're at least a year old.
Wow, that's expensive. I
How
guess,
much are-
Well, that's because you're doing a one thing,
right.
you know, just doing a single
So if
Where is
we
the
did
cost
multiples,
for
the
it?
cost would go down per,
per
yeah,
install.
So, well, where's the cost at for the
bicycles.
bicycle?
It's the second page of the handout.
oh, what we had
labeled
discussed last time.
ESTF bicycle parking at bus shelter.
Okay.
Proposal.
Thank you so much.
It looks like this. It has like kind of a grid at the top.
Okay, let me see if I can.
And this was, you know, looking at all the,
Oh, wait,
you know, when, this was for the DDA, when we were trying to get the DDA to add.
right.
I think,
So this was a year or so ago.
yeah.
I'm sorry, there's 3 pages. I missed one. So there's actually the grid starts on page 2, and then this is page
Free.
I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
I don't know if I have that one.
And the thing, and the part of it is, you know, we don't have high demand for a bunch of bicycles, but
Is it in the other packet next to you?
Yes, you should. I
yeah,
think in
it's
the-
right after the minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, this
Right
one,
there.
okay, I
Yep.
might have that,
It's with the bus shelter too.
yeah, okay.
So. What, oh, I see, the different vendors, different prices, okay,
Yeah, that was just who when they were looking at pricings.
okay. And who did this for,
The mobility group, this was trying to get we had heard that the DDA was in the process of putting bus shelters on Jackson Road, and the mobility folks did some background to try and get them to incorporate bike racks at the time, but we were a little late and things were kind of underway, so.
The difficulty wasn't so much the cost as it was the changing sort of what we'd already asked for in terms of easements and
Yeah, I'm not even sure what the issues were, but yeah.
yeah.
And so that would still be an issue, right? Because you
Easements is part of the process with anything that you do. I'm sure you know. So almost any of these capital improvements that we're talking about, part of the task would be the easements. Now, whether there would be a cost associated with that.
oh, yeah, there would
There may
be.
be, yeah,
I mean, if you're gonna do an easement, there's a legal cost.
Well, I don't, but
and-
also sometimes there's,
Survey
you know, survey, but if you're outside of the right of way, or maybe, you know, some kind of.
Oh,
Although most of what we would be talking about would probably be in the right of way.
Mhm.
Whether it's sidewalk or bus stops.
so it'd be interesting if we could do, so there's nothing in between a pad with two. It's either, just looking at the
Oh, you can
bicycle
do as
rack.
many as you want. I mean, this was just a sampling basically of what you could do, but you could do, I mean, if you do.
So you could do 3 racks.
You could do, yeah, if you do 3 hoops, it's 6 bikes. Literally, they kind of say, you know, you can put 2 bikes on a hoop.
mhm.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Is that how I should read that? So that would be 3 hoops.
Yeah, 3 hoops would be 6 bikes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's typically the way they.
Yeah, all of these are for 3.
The first one's a single.
And that would be 2 bikes, yeah.
This is a single pad with parking for 6 bikes, 3 used out. So is the cost 2,700 for each one?
For the, yeah, for the.
Okay.
For the pad and the hoops.
Okay. So, you know, I guess I'm not as familiar with improvements in this area. And, you know, I was thinking that maybe we could identify the areas that we're interested in and have Marie and Ken price it out for us in some format. That's what I was thinking, but unfortunately, they're not here today.
Well, it's easier to assign work to them.
Yeah, we can do that.
A question, do we have we determined what we have? I mean, is
Well,
it-
as far as funding.
Yeah.
For this purpose, I'm thinking maybe up to $500,000. But what the board had suggested is to look at one-time capital improvement plans in order to put together a plan for transit.
And so there, if I understand correctly, we're considering these physical improvements as a sort of one-time investment in terms of pedestrian access
Yes.
and shelter
Shelter.
for bus riders. But also, I think there's the potential for investing some, I'm not sure how this would work legally, in capital needs for WAVE, which Marie has sort of put out on the table.
Well, and I think it depends on what it is. We had a conversation, well, at least I had a conversation with Mariah, our attorney. And what she suggested is that we put together what our plan is and what improvements we'd like to see take place, and they could review it and give us some feedback on whether it falls within the language, the ballot language or not.
we were, I think, hoping that we would get an answer, and yes, you can use it for these kinds of things, and then she sort of turned it around and said, you know, present the list
Yeah,
first, and
present
then
your
we'll
plan,
evaluate.
And then we'll evaluate it.
So with regard to wave, we were talking about signs and shelters.
Now, in that I think both of those we should include on our list. But I think as part of our charge is kind of identify where we would like to see the improvements. Like, you know, I think if we just make a general statement, then someone's gonna have to determine what type and where.
So I think, correct me if I'm wrong about this, Joyce, I think the Board of Trustees wanted us to look at what the capital improvements would be and what would the budget for them be. So
That's
we have to
correct.
come up with costs too.
We'll have to come up with the cost, and that's getting back to Ken and Marie. I think if we determine what it is that we want to see and where, they can then cost it out and help us build out that plan. Because, you know, that's just not my area of expertise.
So do you think that, I was wondering if our utilities department could assist us with that? No?
Probably, you know, certainly they could maybe put together some information based on informal quotes. But I'm wondering if like Ken automatically would have that information because of the system that they have in place. And because it goes beyond just Scio Township. So I'm thinking,
They may have done.
yeah,
this
they're
kind of
purchasing
calculation.
items all the time. So
Yeah,
they
the-
should be able to give us a pretty good cost
The
estimate.
problem is they're a contractor with us and we're asking them to do our work. I don't know,
Yeah.
I'm feeling a little bit like,
Yeah,
cause like I'm in a battle about this money right now,
Right.
as you probably saw the
Right.
emails.
but
So I don't know if we can intrude on them. I
Well,
mean,
we-
if you're fine with it,
well, we could, you know, we could ask them for the information, ask them for the documentation. Because we're not gonna look at purchasing something with some type of overhead tied to it. I think,
or could we get, or could, cause I remember Ken talking about, we contract with so-and-so to get, and I can give you some of those numbers. Even these are not up to date, I think he indicated. But
if
if they're willing to do it, I mean, I'm not trying to create more work, but if they would just give us the contractor names and we could follow
Yeah,
up on
we could
that,
follow up
that
on
would at
that.
least be,
Yeah,
if they felt uncomfortable doing that for us. So it's just another idea.
yeah,
Well, I'm sorry, I was just gonna say, they may get a faster answer.
yeah.
As a purchaser,
Okay.
as a bigger purchaser of these kinds of things.
And we might be able to get it at a lower price too, because of quantities too.
Sure.
But that's why I was saying, whatever they provide, I would want to see the documentation.
One other thing that is in the back of my mind, we should know, by the end of the month, whether or not the Jackson Road Transit planning will go through or not. And I'm just wondering, we have a list of things, but if we're going to be doing a bunch of planning and wanting to do some implementation, you know, $500,000 would go a long way for, you know, starting something there. Or on the other hand, like Will had done, you know, some of the stuff around Dexter and Wagner, which is sort of a little bit outside that corridor area. You know, I'm just trying to you know, think about long-term what we do. We don't want to do something that you know, if we really should be moving at one of the DDA bus shelters to align with a certain crosswalk or something like that, I don't want to invest capital funds in something that might change if we have the opportunity to do that study.
So
I'm
Dan,
not following you, I just make sure I understood what you just said.
Okay, so we'll find out whether we get this $50,000 grant for the Jackson Road corridor study.
Yeah.
By the end of this month.
Okay,
So I wouldn't wanna, you know, that plan may have other suggestions for things that are along Jackson Road corridor. I mean, it wouldn't affect like signage. I mean, you know, putting up signs for where the way bus stops are, but I'm not sure we wanna put more, capital investment in bus, bike loops or anything along the corridor, maybe before
That
that
study's done.
study's done.
So.
You're not suggesting using this money for that study.
Not for that study, but maybe for the implementation of some things that come out of that study, but that may be, that's gonna be,
Well, I was
a
gonna ask, how
year.
long will it take to get
I think we have to, I forget,
feedback?
it would be about a year, I think, for that. to go
Well, we
through
could
the
always just put
process.
an asterisk next to this plan saying, subject to change based on the
The study
results
that's
of
underway.
the
Yeah.
Jackson Road study.
If it happens,
Yeah,
But there's also, remember, there's also other sources. I mean, the
Mhm.
DDA, part of its mission is, making pedestrian improvements.
Mhm.
And so if that study says, oh, we need to have a hawk signal, at these two locations so that
Mhm.
pedestrians can safely make their way across, that could be funded entirely by the DDA.
Right. Or crosswalks or other.
Yeah,
concepts.
that's true.
That's right.
and that's why I'm also trying to think of, especially when you brought up the Dexter Wagner piece, because,
Well,
yeah.
and on the Dexter Wagner
Mhm.
area, I went out with OHM, our
Oh,
engineering firm, just to kind of look at that area. And they did have like some suggestions on what we should do and what we should not do in that area. So maybe I could have Matt put together an estimate regarding that area and what the cost is and the improvements.
I thought that's what he was tasked with doing.
Well, basically, he was thinking, I think initially there was a question of, I guess, extending sidewalks all the way through in certain areas near the,
Right, connecting up to the bridge that.
The highway
to the
bridge.
bridge, the highway bridge, and he was thinking that's not something we should consider. He had like specific things like relocating, one of the stops.
Hmm.
And then with relocation of the stop, you could run the sidewalk and maybe a shelter that could really accommodate several areas right in that area. So I was thinking maybe we should get his plan, something,
Relocate the stop, the existing
One of the
stop on
stop.
Wagner.
Well, there's two
Yeah,
stops.
there was one on Wagner, but it was near that street,
Oh,
I know, I don't know the name of
Elizabeth,
it.
yeah, it was near Elizabeth,
Visual.
but he was suggesting that we,
It's this map, right?
yeah, look at relocating the stop and then make the improvements
Locating it where?
on Elizabeth instead of Wagner.
Putting the stop on Elizabeth?
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, that's not gonna work for AATA. That's a dead end street. Where's the bus come turn around? Oh, just the stop would
Just
be
the
on
stop.
It wouldn't
Elizabeth.
enter Elizabeth.
Yeah, it would
It would
be
be
at
bus
at
wouldn't
at
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth.
I see.
Mhm.
But how do you watch for it?
And,
Well, I guess,
I guess the other thing is thinking about bus stops in pairs, right?
Mhm.
And if you get off the bus and you need to cross the street, where do you do that?
Well, that was one of the other things he stated around that area, that perhaps we could have a stop that serviced both sides of the street, which I never really thought about,
but the routes don't go that way. It's a one-way out west, left on Wagner, in on Jackson. So now you're
But
having
there's-
people cross the street to get on the bus.
But there is a stop that goes into town. I mean, that's the other stop, isn't it? The stop that's on Dexter is the one for people
Correct.
headed into.
Oh, yeah.
It loops around.
Yeah, he
It's
Oh, so
around
it
the
goes
Jackson
around
and it
the-
loops and it comes back up.
It goes around the island.
It takes-
have him
yes.
lay it out and maybe meet with this committee, and give us some rough estimates of cost.
This is like, I mean, we're like on a timeline. Now
Well-
everybody's got something to help us say. I mean,
Yeah.
But what, is there a time that
Well-
these funds have to be
Well, actually,
spent by?
there isn't a time frame for getting this done, and from my perspective, I think we need to, before we approve a plan like this, we need to know whether the millage will pass or not. So that, if, for example, the millage doesn't pass, and hopefully that's not the case, but if that should occur, those dollars could be used to extend services for the next year,
Mhm.
Until we can.
until we can.
Try again.
Try again.
Try again or whatever, so
Just,
I
we
think-
could
well,
try.
that's a
we
good
could-
point. There's no sense in passing the
doing
capital budget, and we
improvements
don't
until
have.
you know you have a funding source.
Yeah,
That's
I
right. There's
agree
not
with
gonna be
that.
buses running any.
Totally agree with that.
Yeah, so I think it's good to have the plan, but I think we should wait for if it's approved by the board, it would be subject to the approval of the millage.
Well, that makes sense. That would allow us to have more information about whether the grant has been received from SEMCOG. And I mean, I think all of this is sort of, it's a capital plan, right? I mean,
Right, it's a
it's
capital
it's basically, it's sort of setting goals with the understanding that factors will impact those goals and likely change them before you necessarily get to the point of actually executing the plan.
Yeah, I almost see it as these are needs,
Yeah,
and here are some budgets that of how we.
Here are some costs that.
Yeah, a budget for this particular, meeting this particular need, and
Yeah.
these, and the priority of these needs might change based on ABC.
right.
Well, if we circle back to where you started, I think, Joyce, what I was thinking is we could look at the routes. I mean, we have the route maps for the fixed service that AAATA provides in Scio Township. And the question is, do we have something similar for that, to that, for Wave?
We don't, but remember we went out with Marie.
Right, so we have a list.
Yeah, and we talked about what we would like to see on her route. So I think it's a matter of just capturing that information.
And I did find your emails on your notes. I'm sorry.
It's
I
okay.
sent you an email.
Y'all get lots of emails.
Yeah, so that's.
But I
think-
wanted to go back to the question I asked you earlier. When you said Wade wanted to wanted help with capital improvements, we're talking shelters and signs, right?
Yes.
Not vehicles.
I'm thinking it might, it might be vehicles. I don't know.
No, they get their vehicles paid 100% by the state.
Okay, all right, so that we don't have to worry about.
So what do you think Marie was referring to, Kim? When she talked to, because she reminded us in an email just recently.
I think it was shelters and signs.
Oh, okay. All right.
So I think we could, probably include that in the plan. We, need some detail as far as where we want to see them.
Yeah.
But I would
How
think we
many
can include
signs?
those. Yeah,
And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I think the rental of the Woodview Commons is coming up soon.
it
I
is.
mean, they're landscaping.
Well,
And I think Kathleen Brandt mentioned to me that she's seen where they got 3,000 for this unit and.
Yeah, they're,
Well, yeah.
They're
79 units are gonna be occupied by the
they
end
said
of
July,
July.
in July.
Wow,
Yeah, it's
okay,
coming up
so-
pretty quick.
So that's their first phase.
So one of the big things that we've talked about with Wave, which is a little bit off capital, was servicing.
That's a subdivision.
Well, they've already paid $30,000 towards bus
The
shelter.
shelter, yeah.
Right,
And that's
which-
way more than the shelter's gonna cost.
it could be.
hey, they could have a bike hoop.
They can have bike hoops, we could do the deluxe model of bus shelter with
Sure.
amenities for bicyclists and I don't know.
Okay, so
I mean, eventually there's gonna be 400, how many, 480 or something?
I forget,
That's
but
a
it's-
lot,
Five
that's
something.
a lot of potential bus riders.
That's right.
and you might want to have more than one stop if it's that big.
Oh, you mean like internal stop?
Well, it might be a good idea.
Yeah, but you have to also think that it's not just the stop isn't on one side, there's a stop
Oh, to get off on the other
other
side.
side. So
Right.
it would be two, if
That's
you're
right.
really going to
That's right.
hear it.
Good point.
That's probably how we
That
should be
money's
thinking
gone.
about bus stops in general along this route, because I think the DDA was sort of like one here, one there.
Yeah.
But they were only just funded 5 initially.
So in terms of us responding to the BOT, I don't think that. So. I'm taking your point into consideration about the vote on the millage is not gonna happen yet, but they wanted us to report back in 30 days or something like that. So we could come up with a list of capital improvements that we think are appropriate, but we don't have it fine tuned as to where. Where's the sign going? Where's the shelter going?
Yeah, and that's the part I do think it would be beneficial to identify where we want to see things take place. Cause I don't know how to get to the count otherwise.
Right,
So I had made a 9-point list of capital stuff,
Okay.
items. Bus shelters, bus stops, lead walks. Remember I was talking about that?
Mhm.
Bike hoops, it stops, concrete pads for shelters. Publication/map, that was the idea Jan had.
Jan
That
had-
could be in our township hall, where people could see what routes are available. Go Pass program funded by the DDA, sidewalk on south side of Dexter Road, that was the connector conversation, connecting up to the bridge.
right.
The sidewalk. And then the Upland Ridge, you sent us an email about that. Completion, they have sidewalks, completion of the sidewalks on Upland before Scio Church and on Scio Church and Kensington Woods. And further down at that bus stop. Those are the 9. So we can create a list of items that we perceive to be
Well,
part of a capital
under each
budget.
of those headings, we could have suggested locations.
All right,
Yeah,
Well, some of them are locations, but yeah, we could. I mean, I'm just looking at this list and, you know, it's got basically, well, it's
the
a map,
minutes.
it's a map with,
Oh,
and then it
okay.
has,
And then
it has sort of like
inventory.
which ones, you know, sort of what status each of the stops is in, so it's either got
from AATA,
a sidewalk, but no lead walk, or
yeah.
sidewalk with.
Okay,
lead
so we
walk.
got
so
that,
do
we
we
know
wanna
where
maybe
we
walk through
need.
some of these? Or not? I'm asking, I was just, with this map, where they have the status of what's there, is that something you think we should look at,
Well,
discuss?
I'm trying to think how to sort of expedite this. What if we created, we asked them, in each case, Marie with the list of improvements that we talked about in our tour.
On our
and-
tour,
And, Ken with these maps. And, you know, with understanding that, you know, there's sort of a couple of different anomalies where we're talking about, you know, sidewalks and so on.
Mhm.
And those are sort of more OHM, I think, related because that's an engineering question more so than a, you know, bus organization kind of question.
And then
And
Wagner
just have them
Wagner
give us
Dexter.
a price that would be to put in shelters,
And where?
well, at all of the locations. So that would be sort of like the grand plan. If we were to put in like these minimal shelters with bus hoops at each of these locations, how much would it cost?
But I guess I wonder, well, I don't know how many we're talking about, but if we did something like that, would it be too much where it looks real busy? I don't know, I just.
Oh,
if
you just have a pad that's right next to where
No,
the
he's
shelter
talking
is.
about the shelter where we don't have shelters now.
Yeah, I mean, AATA has always defined a need for shelter as so many people.
Right.
I believe, and I know that the Wagner doesn't fit that need, because Ken gave us some numbers of the daily ridership. But I just feel that feels a little bit out there in the dark by itself, and a shelter might be a good thing for our
Oh,
citizens.
on Wagner.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
well,
Wagner.
I think we
Even
should
though it
include
doesn't
shelters
meet their
there, too.
definition
Yeah,
of the
I agree.
ridership, I think we would like a shelter there.
And actually, Matt Parks thought if we relocated the stop to Elizabeth, you would get more use and more frequency of use. Primarily because it's not.
Not in the dark.
Yeah, it's not in the dark, it's not directly on the road like that, just sitting there. So he thought we would actually get more ridership
Why would we get more ridership?
because people would feel more comfortable waiting for the bus. at that location.
Drive by and look.
Yeah,
I think I understand now. It's
I thought
it's
that was.
just shifting the stop
Yeah,
further
just shifting it
down.
down.
It's not putting it back on Elizabeth, it's sort of
Yeah,
keeping
it's
it
kind
on
of-
Wagner.
Yeah, the way
Oh, it
it
would
is,
still remain on Wagner.
Yeah, it's just moving it further south.
but it's,
Oh, okay.
yeah, it sits kind of isolated into the weeds and everything.
I see.
Yeah, so
It'd be
Okay.
more visible.
it would be more
at a
visible.
corner.
Yeah. We could
Yeah.
maybe.
Although
put a
the
light
crossing
there,
of
too.
the road is a little bit dicier there because you're closer to the intersection where you have a light.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the other piece is crosswalks or, it's just.
That intersection is not safe at any time for pedestrians, because there's so much left turn action going on.
Mhm. Well, why don't I have him work on that part of it? And I'll bring it back to our next meeting and we can try to turn this around maybe in 2 weeks. Maybe.
Well, I was thinking, that maybe there's a way, to just, it doesn't have to be, we know that it'll be cheaper if we do a lot of them at once, but if we have like a per unit cost, it could be, the lead walks, we have no lead walks, we have a whole bunch of things that need lead walks, because they're not very free if you don't have a lead walk, right?
Right.
So, you could say a lead walk is X dollars, given a certain.
$5,000.
Yeah, we could, they're gonna vary, but yeah.
Sure.
But I think, going back to those, if you wanna add, the minimum might be, if you wanna do one bike hoop, that would be sort of the minimal thing, cause, we don't have a high ridership. You might put a few more bike hoops at a major stop or something, but, a bike hoop and a pad is X. And then you can say we need X number of these, X number of these, X number of these. So we could easily spend $1 million, but at least, then it's easier to prioritize the mix and match, if you will.
Well, that's what I was thinking. If we had the sort of grand list, like,
Mhm.
this is how much it would cost to outfit all of these
All of-
bus stops.
Mhm.
And then we can sort of whittle it down from there based on how much money we actually have to work with. Or, it like, when you're doing fundraising, you set a ambitious goal and then you see if you can attract the funds. I mean, we haven't really sort of tapped into the DDA.
And that's a good point, if we, for some reason, get close to spending $500,000 and we still have 200,000 more that we need, maybe make a request.
Or
But
we do the
identify.
ones that aren't in the DDA and the DDA does the ones that are in it.
I mean, we spend,
Yeah.
as a township, we spend an awful lot of money on automobile infrastructure, maintenance and improvements. Way more than we spend on pedestrian improvements, even with the millage coming in, for parks and pathways. And I think this is an opportunity to try and sort of prioritize doing something for pedestrians. Non-motorized transportation.
Being an avid bus rider and biker going to downtown City Hall, there are racks on the buses. So there's 2 bike racks, and I've never had an issue whenever I rode my bike to actually put my bike on the rack on the bus. So for what that's worth, doesn't mean there's gonna be more ridership, there could be more density somewhere, but never had any issues with getting my bike to go onto the bus to get to my destination. And then I'll follow up. I was just going in to look at some information from OHM, and this is regarding the Elizabeth stop. He said he'd like to set up a meeting with AAATA to relocate the bus stop along Wagner closer to the intersection with Elizabeth. This area is more open and could better serve those residents off Elizabeth and allow for pedestrians to board the bus at a safer location. A pad or something placed there, could be placed there at some point. The estimated fix is $50,000 to $100,000 with some ditch and road tweaks. So there's that, but then he's getting into, there's a whole laundry list of reasons, for the intersection of Wagner and Dexter and Ann Arbor where there are no ramps, sidewalks, or push buttons. He's saying that's $250,000 to $300,000 to update that. So you
We're not
can.
doing all that.
Exactly.
Right,
It's like you'd spend your whole capital
yeah.
That's not what
budget
we
on
asked.
one intersection, so.
But it's the thing of, that safety
Right.
piece, that you can get on the bus on one side, but you can't get,
Yep.
if you're getting off the bus on the other side, it doesn't work, although with that loop, it may not you know,
Yeah,
depending how
and
you
there's
do
issues with the
it.
bridges and ADA accessibility, but he's even making recommendations of maybe even removing that, one of the bus stops, I believe, that's along Dexter Ann Arbor. So
Yeah, he had
it's-
mentioned
there's a
that
lot
on
of,
my tour with him.
yep,
too.
exactly.
I've seen people
So-
trying to get to that bus, I've been paying closer attention, and I've seen people trying to get to that bus stop that you just described on Dexter Ann Arbor Road, and it's, you know, it's like running the gauntlet through
Yeah,
the,
it's-
through the traffic, because traffic is not moving slowly at that point. It's
Sidewalks.
behaving as if it's still on the
Ditches,
the
yeah.
vast portion of Dexter Ann Arbor Road, even though the
Shoulder.
speed limit drops.
And
It's-
it's trying
it's
to make,
scary.
and people are making that light.
Yep, it's,
So this seems,
it's not pleasant.
so this is kind of beyond our charge.
Yeah.
Because we were the transportation advisory group regarding the millage.
Right.
Now we're becoming the
Focus.
transportation, well, in all fairness, it was in our original charge of capital budget and
Right.
projections and stuff. But it seems to be getting beyond, and that would be more suited for our the permanent transportation committee.
Some of the questions that we're getting into are.
'Cause we're not gonna
long-term questions,
planning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
yeah,
well, I think, you know. with-
because those might implicate Washtenaw County Road Commission dollars too.
I think what, Jan, what you were saying, how you were characterizing it a few minutes ago, I think is the right way for us to think about our task, because we are basically, you know, a revived advisory committee that was meant to be short-term, like you were saying.
Yeah,
And I think pulling together kind of a large list of, here's the potential capital improvements. Here's some, you know, back of the envelope cost estimates for what it would cost. These are the ones that we think as an advisory committee should be maybe looked at.
Prioritized.
Yeah, prioritized, looked at first. But this is gonna be subject to input from this SEMCOG funded study, and will require much more study by a long-term
Transportation committee.
transportation planning committee, which may be a subcommittee of the planning commission or whatever, however it's constituted.
Well, here it's now gonna be a part of the BOT.
Pardon?
Well, they have to bring it back, but I think, you know, either way, we just need one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine with the BOT taking that on.
Yeah.
Oh, no. No.
but you know,
As a supervisor, I would say, no, that's a planning function. I would house that in the planning commission.
but in those areas, like, for example, when we did the tour with Marie and we talked about various locations, I'm thinking that's something that we could probably recommend.
Yeah, exactly. That would be part of our recommendations would be, here's the big scheme of things, the long, you know,
That's
the
good
big
long-term.
ambitious list of everything. And within that, here are the things that we think should be, you know, done first.
Okay, yeah,
And then, like, I think your point is well taken by me, is that, you know, we may wanna, before we make a final determination on this, we wanna see the millage passes.
right, yeah.
Well, you know, all of this is coming up pretty fast. I think you know, we'll know about the grant very soon. We'll know what the results are of the August 6th election before you know it. And, you know, I think in terms of something like this, long before any money is authorized or
Yeah, we'll
budgeted,
know.
we'll have a lot more information.
And all of this information that we're pulling together too is really helpful for, I mean.
Yeah, we've gathered quite a bit.
Yeah.
For, you know, the transportation committee and or whatever.
Okay, so what's our next step? Let's kind of summarize, you know, what we need to do in order to put together our recommendation. Yeah,
I'll send an email out with all those 9 items that we discussed at our last meeting. And that's our big picture.
Right.
okay,
Um,
Well, I guess what I would suggest is that we incorporate that list into the minutes. We try to pull, because I think part of our challenge here is that we've got lots of pieces of information that aren't really sort of aggregated, and so maybe underneath each of those headings, try and begin to, build out sort of numbers, like more in a form of a spreadsheet maybe.
Mhm.
So for example, under your heading of lead walks, potential lead walks needed at this many locations along Jackson. And that could include both the wave section of the route and the AATA section of the route, and then.
And you know, we got some figures on that.
Yeah,
From Ken said 5 to 7 grand for just the lead walk connecting to the sidewalk.
we may have enough. that
But
we
if it's
can
with
put
a pad and
together.
a bench, it's 20 grand.
Well.
I'll give
we
you
can ask-
everything I
we
wrote
can-
down.
We can ask them to do it, or, or maybe.
If we have enough, maybe
Chris
Chris
and I
could just
could-
put together
we
a
could put it together.
spreadsheet
Yeah.
and start
then
adding it up.
Fill up the holes
Yeah,
with-
build
by
the
asking
plans.
Ken.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that the reason I think it makes more sense for us to do it is because I think
Raise a good
somebody,
point.
it may have been you said that, AATA has their standard, maybe it was you, Chris, I can't remember.
Well, it was Kim.
AATA has their standard
Guilty.
for how many
She's
people
suspect.
it takes to qualify for a bus shelter, right?
Yeah.
And their standard is different than
Than
the
ours.
approach that we're taking. And rather than, get into, put Ken in an awkward position where he's applying somebody else's standard, it might make more sense for us to try and do this ourselves. But I would say a spreadsheet that has the headings that Kim was talking about, and then underneath it, sort of, a grand number for how many of these we could do,
Mhm.
given the current routes. With the understanding that the routes, the stops that, may shift around a bit, based on the results of the planning study. But that would give us at least a rough, big
Yeah.
ballpark number, and then we can say within, that large number of potential shelters, for example, we think these, 8 locations are the top priority. These should come first.
And,
And then
then-
the bus stop signs are a big.
Well, we
from
talked
Wade.
about signage when we were out there, that maybe,
Yeah,
maybe there's a need to really
I
up the game on signage.
saved your emails.
That's in some ways, that's low hanging fruit, because the signage is gonna be cheap. By
I know, but
comparison
we
to
want-
building shelters and putting in concrete
yeah.
pads and stuff like that.
But we are talking about a capital plan,
Right.
so, maybe we should include something for signage.
All right.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah, I think,
And Jan, can you find out what a publication with a map of our,
What
what
it
is
was
1,
on?
2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6 routes? 6 routes, 2 routes with wave and 3 routes with AATA,
Mary
right?
Gillis might be helpful with that. She's also always pricing, publications, how much. it
Cause I
costs.
think that would be really good for our residents. And that could go on our website too.
Mhm. And the other thing, I mean, I'm not as familiar, but as we talk about signage and the millage, it would be nice to have something that reflects the residents supporting transportation, some type of logo or something that kind of bring.
Paid for by the residents of Scio.
Something more creative, but that's the point, though, you touched on it.
It makes sense. We
Yeah,
have,
I
we have
mean-
signs that sort of acknowledge that, conservation easements were paid for with
Yeah.
land preservation millage
Mhm.
funds. We could have something similar for the transportation
Yeah,
millage.
I think it's really something that would be a positive, and it would help those that are vested understand and appreciate their funds being used for something really beneficial. And it might help later if you have to go back out again.
I don't have any objection to that.
So,
Got that one, please.
Yeah, so we really have, if we take the list that we have, and I don't know, with the Go Pass, that's really a DDA
That's the
thing, right?
DDA.
I brought that up and you, last time, and you said, yeah, but
Well, I mean.
we could
it's
look
not-
into it or something.
Well, I think it's well, there might be.
I can get rid of that.
Yeah, so
All right.
I'm thinking it's really, and I would move signage into a separate thing, because you have the route maps, and then the signage is different. Because you could do the signage without necessarily doing the route map publication.
No. The publication / map would be for the residents to know where they go,
Exactly.
not where signs are.
Right, and so the signage is a separate, what I'm saying
Yeah.
is that's another line item. So we
Yes,
really
yeah.
have 8 items, because I think
Yep.
all, your 9 included sidewalk connections in a couple places.
Yep,
So we could do
uplands.
sidewalk connections, and those could be at, X feet of sidewalk here, X feet of sidewalk here for the location, so you, per foot of sidewalk, you know how much that costs.
Cement,
Yeah.
yeah, and that might be something that Matt could weigh in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I think with that, then you can come up with, the number of signs and the length of the sidewalk, the number of lead walks, the number of bus stops without shelters, and then you just do the multiplier and you come out with what that budget would be. Now, that doesn't necessarily include, the engineering and all of those other things that might happen, from a cost standpoint, to be able to implement it, write the RFPs, whatever.
Right,
Yeah.
So
So
the lead walks that Ken was talking about, he was saying 5,000 to 7,000.
right, so I'm wondering, is that something that we would maybe hire somebody to do on our behalf? Or is it something that AATA or WAVE would be required to do because of their charge with transit, I guess I'm just wondering if, if we're gonna be able to meet the same standard that might be required for something like that.
I'm not sure I'm following.
Wave is already running a deficit running service, let alone paying for lead walk.
No, we would fund it. I guess the question I have is,
Who's gonna oversee that the design of it is correct?
that's correct, meeting certain specifications,
And that's why you do need, either an engineer or someone.
Yeah, okay.
You're gonna have to create the documents to
I don't know if we
provide.
need an engineer. And by that I say, if I needed a sidewalk in front of my yard and I hired a cement company, they would come out, they would measure, they know how much cement is per foot and depth and all that. I don't know if you need an engineer to do that.
Kim,
Well,
Kim, here's why you do, because I sat through a lot of discussions of the bus shelters the DDA did, and also the input from the township attorney. There's standards, very, precise standards for the pitch of,
public.
Oh,
for the accessibility, and there's people who actually go around and measure when these kinds of improvements are put in Washtenaw County. There's people who go around and measure, and if they're not right, then they file a lawsuit.
And that's what happened to the city of Ann Arbor.
Yeah, and it's important.
Or the city of
Okay.
Ypsilanti had the same problem too. I think some of
I
their
have some
shelters were.
lawyer friends that do
Yeah,
that work.
If you were just putting in a sidewalk on your private land, that would probably be okay, and
I hear you.
yeah.
Plus the soil, you need to have the testing of the concrete, you need to have the testing of the compaction, there's an oversight of the quality control and with public work.
All right, so
Which may or may not be built into this
maybe-
cost, I don't know.
I don't
To
know.
answer your question, Joyce, I guess. I guess you could talk to AATA and see how they feel about that. They
yeah,
seem to be okay about providing information as much as they have, but I'm not sure that they'd be eager, but maybe they would be. Maybe they would.
well, why don't I do this, in preparation for our next meeting? Maybe Chris and I can, get together, probably get Matt involved. We could invite Ken, and Marie, and we can kind of huddle and figure out exactly, how we can get this laid out in a plan that can be brought back to the group. Will that work?
I think so. I really think we're at the stage where we're moving to a spreadsheet.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that
Well, if you
too.
wanna participate.
I was gonna say, I'm
Yeah.
happy to participate as well.
Okay.
And then I think we have to be clear whether there, is this just a construction cost or is this a project cost?
Right.
And that's what I think would be helpful to differentiate, because the
Okay,
total costs are gonna be project costs, they're not gonna be construction costs.
right, you're right.
And 30% of the construction costs.
So, Kim, we're still gonna need that, your information. Okay,
I'll send that to.
Okay.
Oprah, absolutely. I'll write it, I'll type it out so that it's legible.
okay, all right. Anything else on that item for now, or are we all set?
I feel excited about it.
I am too. Yeah. Okay, so the next one is just in reference, and this is another thing where I think we're gonna have to pull information together on budget projections for transit services.
So that's these two sheets?
Yeah, we got one from Marie, one from Ken, and then we had revenue projections from our assessor.
So I looked at this today from Marie
Yeah,
and I was like, 585,000 for 2025. So I called her knowing that she might be in a meeting, which she was. She's on a break.
okay.
And I said, wow, these are pretty large numbers. And how are you getting them? I realize we're operating at a deficit, but. So I said, she started to explain some stuff. Her methodology is on this page that was attached to her email. This
This
was an attachment.
this page here.
Could be,
Yeah,
yeah,
but she's got
yeah.
it broken out.
Yeah, she
By-
said this is her methodology for each year. And so I did not have a chance to look at this.
Yes, and I just received hers, I think, yesterday or either this morning. And so I was thinking that,
Before you go there, so I just wanted to tell you, I said to Marie, I said, now, how is this explainable to the township?
Yeah.
Because we've been operating with this, whatever, 113, whatever it's been, 110, 100,000. If our costs are more than that, how the hell are we paying for it?
mhm,
Now, I realize our door to door is shifted. We're gonna do real door to door instead of like these deviations we used to do where we had some time in the Jackson Road corridor, right? But we're just talking fixed route. And she explained to me that she was pulling money from other areas that it's getting paid for by other funders. There was money left over, and the cost didn't cover that. That's how we're paying our drivers to do it. That's how we're paying the gas. So that much I know, and I wanted, and so I said to her, I said, you're gonna have to be prepared to explain this to the township. Because we're looking at these projections of AATA, and they eat up all the $400,000 plus dollars.
Yeah.
And, so I just kind of wanted to share that with the group.
okay, but as I was looking at her numbers, maybe I'm, and I probably will need to touch base with her, but I look at, she has the Scio pass-through through ATA. And I'm assuming it's like 24,000, 48 and 48
Where are you looking on page 2,
on
page
the
1?
worksheet.
On page
Yeah.
1 of the worksheet.
Uh-huh, yeah,
24,
yeah, 24,000 for door to door. And she's got 48,000 for community connector. And then with the Jackson Road corridor, 48,000.
right, and you can see that money's insufficient to cover costs. So if you add up 48,000
Yes,
times 2 plus 24,000, that's 120. And we're not even getting 120, but they're working on getting those numbers right.
yeah,
So that isn't even covering the services projected. That's the cost of the service projected.
so there's 2 pass-throughs there. That's the MDOT money is the second one, the municipal Scio pass-through, and then the MDOT money.
It seems to be going down. No,
No,
it's
you
not, it's
add
not,
those all
you
up.
add them all together, I
yeah.
see.
So
I don't understand how to
it was
interpret this. to be
difficult
honest
for
with
me
you.
to figure out. See, she shows the revenue side, but I
Not
don't
the
see the
cost.
expense
There's not a direct,
relationship.
well, there's, you can't sort of like just go across and say, okay,
Yeah.
here's the community connector, for example, how much it
In
costs.
Scio.
So what I'll do is I'll meet with Marie. I couldn't
Okay.
do it today. And I will, let's have a Zoom, like take
Okay,
15
let's
minutes
go
to
over
have a Zoom, so we
Okay.
prepare our next meeting.
Yeah, because this is kind of like
And I can
everything
invite
in our
her for it
budget.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I'm wondering if she isn't taking the municipal Scio pass-through, but I don't know what the MDOT pass-through. I don't. Cause
Well, this is the problem. MDOT requires us to have a recipient. They don't just send us a check. They send it to AATA, and AATA is supposed to, that's the pass-through for us. So
But
that's
that-
something
that
different
funds-
than what we
but
do.
that funds all of your operations,
That's
right? It's not a Scio designated.
That's right, and I don't know why she put that in there, but.
Oh, so the municipal SIO pass-through is money from the transportation millage that is passing through AATA to Wave,
According to Marie.
according to
Yeah.
Marie, and then
Now-
the MDOT pass-through is the larger
For all our-
money that also passes through AATA.
That's correct. So that's, but if you read the trail of emails, Ken does not agree with the finance department.
Oh,
He responded to my email updating us, and he said,
There's a little-
no, that's not true. Forrest and I looked at those purchase of service agreements and da, 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 da. So,
so
I
there's
said I welcome the
asterisk
clip.
next to this.
yeah, so, you know, I informed Marie about it. I told her to look at that email, and I said, you might want to call your person in finance and give them a heads up. Cause I'm sure there's gonna be a little powwow about that. You know, what's happening is we have not been getting all of our money. Cause people have left, they've had a shortage of staff and all that, so they've been catching up. And we're pretty much almost caught up, and now it looks like they're giving us more. They realize they need to give us more money. Now, some of it is our budgeting issues, but, so that was why I wanted to have the SIO dollars paid directly to us, but I'm not gonna ask us to do that until we get this agreement, we get this hashed out.
Yeah. So I think what we need to do is get with, Marie
Yeah.
and get some clarity on her numbers. We're gonna do that with the Zoom meeting and have her resubmit.
Okay,
And then, take all of the information and put together the budget, because we got the revenue from Andrea based on, what she project out for 10 years. And then we have Ken's expenses and Marie's expenses, which we'll have in as expense budget. And then, you know, we should be able to have something that's more comprehensive.
right,
Well, if I can just make sure I
Okay.
am clear.
Okay.
So what we're trying to do eventually, in order to meet the requirement that Kim reminded us of showing the sort of projection of future year costs and revenue, is have not only the purchase of service agreement kind of projections that we have from Ken, but we need something comparable from
Marie is kind of
Marie,
in.
a little bit
And then the other
generous in
part-
her information flow. We
Well,
don't need all this.
Well, what we need is, I think, if I
What we
understand
need
correctly,
is our costs.
is to pull out of like the
What we
first
have.
line item is wages. We need to pull out what portion of that is related to the Scio Township service. And then, same thing with the other line items, so that
You
we
mean
have
with Marie.
a similar picture from Marie
Yeah.
of what the year by year costs are for Wave for their
Right.
portion of the service.
Right.
And then we can put those two numbers together
Well,
and compare it to what the projections are from our assessor for the revenue.
Yeah,
right, but there's some other pieces too, you know, like, I know no one likes to hear this, but I think like cost allocation, whether that plays a part in this, if not, what's the administrative cost even to the township to oversee, the bus fund?
Right,
Yeah, so we have to factor that in too.
right. So there's other costs
Yeah.
besides the direct costs for
Mhm.
service.
Yeah,
That we have to factor in as well. So all of those have to be sort of wrapped up
consolidate,
into a presentation back to the board in
Right.
order to meet the requirement that.
yeah,
to really
Kim reminded
develop,
us of,
the
right?
projections, yeah,
Right.
you're right.
Yeah, cause it's
I
not,
don't know if I heard you clearly. I apologize. What was the point?
What I was stating is that, the information that Ken and Marie will provide will help us develop the projection over 10 years as far as the expenses.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but in addition to that, we have to look at, other costs associated with the bus fund and the administration of the bus fund from the township perspective. So we're gonna
Oh, yeah.
get that information and factor that in as well.
The term cost allocation is the one that we use internally
Yeah,
to describe that. It's
Bus
a
allocation.
cost allocation.
cost allocation.
It's how the township factors in all of the
Gotcha.
costs that we incur internally to manage
Understand.
the various funds.
Yeah,
I understand.
One of those jargon terms, I think, we use it so often
Yes.
that we just sort of forget that, not
just the
everyone's
rate,
walking around.
another
thinking
way to
about cost
reconcile.
Yeah, yeah, right. I remember watching a board meeting and that being an issue.
Oh my God.
So I am familiar with this
Yeah, yeah.
term.
It's certainly,
Yeah,
it's
cost
cost.
allocation.
What do you mean you're charging me X for this?
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Don't bring it up in an LPC meeting.
Yeah, you only deserve $10,000 and that's it. Okay, anything else we need to do?
That's a lot.
So,
Move to adjourn. Just playing.
No, but I just have to say, all of this stuff, I keep thinking, fingers crossed for the SEMCOG, but all of this can be very helpful.
oh, absolutely.
We've done,
Do we have
Yeah.
anyone watching?
We
Oh, yeah.
have Rob Patton. Oh, is that, you know what, Rob Patton's hand is up.
Yeah, yeah, so I
We've
was just
done,
thinking, we can't adjourn until we have
Oh.
public comment.
Yeah. So before we go to public comment, what about our next meeting? I don't want to lose sight of when we should meet again.
Sure.
well, can you guys also, with that in mind, give me some times next week you're available to Zoom meet with Marie?
Sure.
How about we do it that first?
Well. Meeting calendar. Oops, that's not it. July.
So I'm open Monday, Tuesday. Not Wednesday, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday,
For
for a Zoom meeting.
for a
with you
Zoom
guys.
meeting. So Kim, I'm gonna have to get back and look at my schedule and I'll email you some dates.
But for our next meeting, if we met 2 weeks from now on Friday, that would be June 28th.
Yeah.
Will
I'm
that
open to the
Will that work
28th.
for everyone?
Jan is shaking.
I have it's a Zoom meeting from 3 to 4, but if we did like 2 to 3.
Oh, we're gonna be so efficient, I think we'll be able to do two.
Yeah, it's a Zoom meeting, so I can just Zoom here.
Okay, 2 to 3.
So 6/28 from 2 to 3 p.m.
Okay, got it.
So what I'll do is I'll send out an email.
Okay,
I'll talk to Marie about it, send out an email, and then she'll respond with her.
Okay, and then we can try to meet next week.
Yep.
Okay,
For next week.
Now are we ready for public?
we're ready for public comment.
Rob, can you hear us?
Yep, I can. Thanks, Chris. Just to make your spreadsheet a little bit bigger, I would recommend that you put ridership numbers associated with each capital improvement project, whether it's if it's a bus stop at Meyer, they're gonna have a lot more ridership than they will at like the Dexter and Elizabeth stop. So put ridership numbers associated with each of those stops so that because you can't, obviously, as you said before, you can't do them all at once. But as you go down the list, you get the most bang for your buck in terms of service to the community by starting with the ones that are the most beneficial first.
That's a good point.
And if you put a scoring with that, and there might be other aspects of how you spend the money that can be scored that you have, and that will develop a priority list column in conjunction with your big spreadsheet. Thank you, Will, for that email a month ago with the the diagram and the bus stop labels. I didn't see it at the time. I just saw it today. I only, when I opened the email, I only saw the spreadsheet from Ken. Would you please pass along my thanks to Ken for that, that diagram? And also in that email, and Jan talked about it a little while ago, you talked about getting a newsletter or a flyer out about the new expanded service coming up in June. I imagine that if you were to do a combined flyer announcing the expanded service with the maps of where those stops are, that might be beneficial, and you could do both at once. Do you have any progress on that flyer?
What's new?
The flyer.
Rob's asking if there's a flyer imminent. And I think, Rob, honest, just to respond, I think honestly, in terms of publishing things, we've been so focused on informing people about the millage renewal that we have not really had the bandwidth to work on that next task. But you're right, we need
It's
to
something that we
put that
can work
information out there too.
Yeah.
Totally understandable. That's everything. Thanks. Good meeting.
Anyone else?
No one else.
Okay,
I
Motion
did
to
want,
adjourn.
before we do that,
yes.
you mentioned that we had, you had some more information from our assessor about a 10-year. I
Oh,
may have misunderstood, but of the 10-year
You're not-
projection,
yeah.
what our.
That's.
yeah, it was,
Would bring up.
it was.
Oh, you gave it
was
to-
Yeah, we gave it to you. It's in this packet with the color chart, which he gives it to us for all.
Not every packet has the color.
Oh,
This one.
Okay, I got it.
okay.
It's a big.
It's a legal spreadsheet,
Yeah,
legal size spreadsheet.
I mean, there's not one in here.
You don't have one?
No, I didn't get one. That's all right, I can get one later, but, or I can make a copy.
Is this yours?
No, that's, I think
Okay,
that's an extra.
It's in this.
Okay.
Okay,
So what
Yeah,
does
all that.
CPI stand for?
consumer price index.
Okay, Headley,
Headley
okay,
amendment.
I get that. Okay.
Okay,
So motion to adjourn.
okay, it's been moved, is there support?
Support.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're such an informal group.
Who seconded that? Was it you, Jan? or was it
Yeah,
you?
I did.
Okay.
Well, Jan was looking at me, Joyce was looking at me.